Whenever you're trying to find out the truth behind the lies that people are telling, sometimes you need to simply ignore all of the foolishness and simply pay attention to the actions that are happening and stay vigilant with the occurrences that are transpiring and the situation as it is. Because I remember a time when I was boundaryless as a man. I didn't have hardly any boundaries. And I didn't realize that I was in a spiritual fight with these narcissists and these emotional and spiritual vampires, energy vampires, whatever you want to call them. You got to be very careful who you invite into your space, because if you don't even have a space to begin with, you're going to be inhabited by entities that just want to take advantage of you. And this is why it's so important to have boundaries. And whenever you're in a spiritual fight, you've got to make sure that hope is not your first strategy point, okay? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have hope. I'm not saying that you shouldn't hope for something, and you shouldn't have faith in the good, the true, the beautiful, and the just. But to completely have your strategy as hope is not going to get you anywhere. I remember when there was a time where I was noticing the gaslighting from this narcissist, and it got so extreme that I ended up having to record conversations that I had with this individual, because the lies were just so insane, and he was legitimately acting as if I was the crazy one. And I couldn't believe it, because this is somebody that I thought was my friend for years. You know, I went to his house to see his family. I knew his family. I knew his family friends. I had traveled with him, and this was a good buddy of mine, I thought, why would he lie? And then I started to notice that the more I became who I am and the more I asserted myself and had more boundaries, it was like the more the gaslighting and the more these attempts were starting to occur, where it was almost like he was trying to infiltrate my being and he was trying to steal my personality. And this was a covert narcissist who I think the most dangerous of all narcissists is the covert male narcissist, because he can use logic and reason to really strategize his way to weasel into your mind. But next to it is obviously the covert female narcissist, which most females that are narcissistic are covert. There's very few female narcissists that are overt. But the overt male narcissist is very easy to spot, because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. That's why he's the overt narcissist. But most of the time, there's very few, like there's a lot of overt male narcissists. There's not very many overt female narcissists. There's a lot of covert female narcissists, and there's not a lot of covert male narcissists. And so one thing that I've seen and one thing that I've noticed with all these kinds of individuals is that not only are they possessed by demons, they are absolutely trying to possess you into making you an object of their reality. You're no longer a subject, a person with wants and needs and desires of their own. You are supposed to be, quote unquote, an object to these people. And the way that I dealt with these kinds of people was just wrong in the past. I was very wrong. And I learned a lot about how to fight physically when I was younger. I was in martial arts, and I learned how to box. I learned how to do Muay Thai, Kung Fu, and I knew how to do a little bit of kickboxing here and there as well. But mostly I was heavily involved with martial arts as a whole, specifically with Kung Fu. And when I was practicing Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, specifically, I suppose, to be even more technical, my Shifu would probably want me to clarify that into Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. So I'll do that for him. But when I was in martial arts, I noticed how physical fighting was not always the same as spiritual fighting, but the same kind of tactics applied. But I didn't really believe in a spirituality. Like, I knew there was a spirituality, but I didn't really have belief in it until I was about 22 years old. And that was when I was truly awakened to the spiritual side of reality. But, and again, I had thought about spirituality, I had thought about these things, but it never really held weight to me. I was always drawn to Buddha. I was always drawn to Buddhism as a whole as well. But I never really could follow through with it. Something about it instinctually felt wrong. And it wasn't until I was 24, 25 years old and I really began to read the Bible. And by the time I had started to read the Bible and started to really question if there was something more here that I was missing, by then, that's when I realized, okay, I know my destination, but I have no clue how to get there. I have absolutely no clue. And everything that I've tried has been wrong to this point. And I was looking everywhere but Jesus Christ. And it was only when I finally accepted and freely accepted Jesus Christ to come into my life that things started to get exponentially better. And that was when I was about 25 years old, and I'm 28 now. It's actually nearly been 3 years, almost to the day now, since Christ has come into my life and I've accepted Christ as my Savior. But the whole ordeal of saviors and spirituality and all these things didn't really make sense to me up until I started to realize what a spiritual battle was and what spiritual warfare is. You see, we are witnessing the echo of the ethereal war in heaven play out before us, and human beings are the fleshly vessels in which the demons and the angels and God himself are operating in and with, to be used to propel life to a more transcendental form. When Jesus said, "Ye are gods," he meant that. We are God-like. We are not God himself, but we are godly and we are God-like. We are made in God's image, and that's why the demons hate us so much. That's why these narcissists hate not only themselves, but you, empathetic people. Like, have you ever noticed that the empathetic and compassionate people that are truly so, which is probably you yourself watching this right now, have you ever noticed that you're the one that seems to be the most normal, and yet everybody else around you seems almost desensitized and dehumanized everything, and you're feeling everything going on? You can walk into a room and you can feel the energy of everybody in the room just instinctually. You don't really even have to name what the energy is. You just know that there's a particular kind of aura or energy. I don't really like the word aura, but there's a particular energy going around that you just feel is in the atmosphere. And you can, people that are not even empathetic or compassionate, if there's tension in the room, people will be able to say, oh yeah, you could cut the tension in the room with a knife or something like that, right? There's that saying out there. And there are times where people can sense that kind of tension, but most of the time people do not have the self-awareness to interpret what's going on in the inner world. And you see, the more you understand about the inner world, the more you're going to understand about the external world. And if you think about it, the whole reality and existence in of itself is a very mysterious thing. It is as mysterious and really kind of psychotic in a lot of different ways. A lot of these people out here, these narcissists, these warlocks and witches and Jezebels, these are just as psychotic people as they seem to be oftentimes. Okay, and I've seen some crazy things in my life. And the way that I dealt with these narcissists in the past was a lack of boundaries. It was a lack of asserting myself. And what I learned from the situation with this male covert narcissist was how to assert myself and how to be okay with it. You know, the first time I tried to address some problems in the relationship that I had with this guy, and it was a friend. This is one of the reasons I don't say I have friends anymore. I have people that I'm building with, and I have people that I don't, because I've seen too many times in my life people that I would call friends, they end up getting jealous or envious, or they backstab, and it's like, man, I was better off alone than being around you backstabbers. And I didn't even know it until the backstabbing happened. And so there is a sense of almost weariness every time I come in crossings with a new person that wants to be my friend. Like, oh yeah, I want to be your friend. It's like, well, what do you want? What are you trying to get from me? There is kind of this, it's not really a lack of trust per se. It's just more of like a moving with cautiousness, because I know how people are. I know what people are like. And I'm pleased to say that for the most part, the people, what's crazy is I've met more genuine people online, around the world, online, through the interwebs, than I have in my physical community and reality. That's crazy. Like, that's just so crazy to me. And so it is a blessing that we've been able to have this technology, but we have to be using it right. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But to go back to the main point with the male covert narcissist, it's about setting boundaries. And how do you set boundaries? Well, you've got to be able to make I statements. You know, I don't like it when, or I like it when, or I like this more than I do that, or I prefer this. Having an I statement and making I statements grounds you in a self-identity. And it's important to have a self-identity. It's important to put yourself, man or woman, at your mental focal point of origin. Because if you don't have yourself right, there's no way in hell you're going to be able to help anybody else. It's just not going to happen. And I knew that, but I didn't know how to get there. And that was where Jesus was able to really give me the vehicle, so to speak, to climb to the top of that mountain and get the clarity and understanding that I do today. It was like I had all the puzzle pieces that I could have possibly gotten together. And there was just the one missing big puzzle piece that I just did not know where to find this puzzle piece. And it was him. It was Jesus Christ. And when I accepted the Spirit of Jesus Christ, it was almost as if all of the other demonic spirits and generational curses and all these things completely dissolved. But some of them at the time were still there, and it took me about, I would say, 3 to 6 months to fully get rid of everything else. And then I had baptized myself in the river around after that. Maybe it was 2 years ago as of September this year. So maybe it was like 9 months or so after accepting Jesus Christ is when I baptized myself. And that was another moment where I really started to tell that these demonic entities and the spiritual warfare was amping up in a way I had no clue before. I had so many weird instances within the last 6 years of my waking up to this spirituality and reality that it's almost like I've hopped timelines in some senses. I've had very strange experiences. I've always been a person that's kind of just attracted the weirdness of life. I've had people that I knew in the past that they would say when I'm around, there's just something magical that's happening. And there's just something that is just kind of different that's always happening when I'm around. everything starts to just kind of fall into a place, and there's more of a connection to reality. And people didn't understand it. Sometimes they were just like, wow, there's just something different about you. There's just something, I don't know what it is. It's just something different in a good way. They could never really tell what it was. But I will tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, if you experience this kind of shift when you're out and about, you're probably experiencing some kind of form of walking the narrow path and actually participating on the front lines of spiritual warfare. But here's the thing. This is what I see too many people, and this is where I was exponentially wrong. I was totally wrong. I used to think that I didn't need a strong body to have a strong mind and soul. I no longer think that, because it's all connected. The soul cannot really be brought into, at least our human souls, cannot be brought into reality without the body. But without the body, the soul doesn't have the opportunity to grow. So we both, like the soul and the body, both need each other. And if you relinquish one, you're not going to get the other. So you're either going to be all flesh, or you're going to be all like too spiritual to the point to where you're not grounded in reality. And that's what happens to New Agers. That's what happens to people with religious spirits. They're so caught up with the ideology and the dogma and the demagoguery and all these things. They're so caught up with the ideas of spirituality themselves that they become the idea, and they're no longer who they are. They no longer have a personal relationship to Christ. They are just this egoless person. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be egoless in some sense. I'm saying that the ego is important because it gives you a backbone. And I see too many people out there, especially the Christians that claim to be Christians, not necessarily on this channel, but a lot of other channels and people out there that are making content claiming to be Christian. And they are preaching tolerance and they're preaching acceptance of everything. And it's like, okay, look, I'm all about accepting things the way they are and accepting things as they are, but because it is what it is sometimes. But the word tolerance is filthy. It is absolutely filthy, that word. It's not a word that I think about as, oh, this is going to be something that everybody should do. No. Because you know what happens when you get tolerant? You let narcissistic people, these witches and warlocks, take advantage of you because you don't have a sense of self. That's why an ego is so important. You have to have an ego because your ego demonstrates to you whether or not you're being disrespected. That is what's most important about having an ego. So you need to have the will and the fortitude of mind to live out the spirit and the truth. But that takes an ego sometimes. And you see all these New Agers and all of these Eastern philosophies is just like, oh, like peace and love. And it's like, well, yeah, let's hope we choose peace and love above all other options. But the world isn't like that. Have you seen the world today? Don't make the same mistakes that I did going about the spiritual fight. Every day that we live is a spiritual fight. And it's a battle that's going to go on eternally. We have to play our part every single day, and the battle has already been won. Jesus has already won the battle. Not necessarily the battle, but the war, because there are times when the demons may win the battle. But the war has already been won. That's why death is an illusion. That's why I say that hell and heaven are both places and states of mind. It's not a question of whether or not you're gonna die. It's a question of are you going to heaven, and are you pursuing heavenliness, or are you accepting hellishness and disregarding your boundaries, your principles, and your livelihood, and not participating in the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High God? That's what this is about. That's why I was wrong. I was wrong because I thought that through tolerance, I would be able to help these people. I thought that tolerance was compassion. I was confusing tolerance with compassion. Compassion means to suffer with, but to not have to drown with the other person if they're going to have to force you to drown. There's a brilliant quote by Jordan Peterson, and he says, if it's you drown or we both drown, it's you drown. That's wisdom, not cruelty. That's actual compassion, unfortunately, for the people that may disagree. It's not about saving people that don't want to be saved sometimes, guys. It's because that's what I did a lot. It's like, oh, maybe I can save this person and make them see the light. I was so naive and foolish to think that. People, have you ever noticed that goodness and good people just are good and they participate in goodness, and it's always the people that need help that come to them? Like, the good people never really go out to seek, like the truly good people never really go out to seek to save people. They're just kind of doing their thing until evil gets a rise out of the populace enough to where good has to step in. And it's always at like the last second when goodness steps in and is able to overcome evil. So focus on yourself, focus on building your life, and let those that fall by the wayside fall by the wayside. It's going to be as simple as that. And I will leave you with this. Sometimes you just have to walk away from their chaos. Sometimes you just have to let go of the chaos, because you might be addicted to the chaos. I know I was. I was addicted to the chaos with the narcissistic people, because that's all I ever knew. I never knew peace. I never knew true peace. So I had all these relationships with, not just within my family and with business, but also with my friends and with women, where it was like there was a continuous pattern until I caught the pattern. I changed my behavior, I broke the pattern, and I moved on to greener pastures. And that's what I want to encourage everybody to do in this video, is to move on to the greener pastures, because and it's not like, of course the water is going to be green where you water it, right? But if you're trying to water the grass where you're at, and people keep digging at your spot, and you're not standing up for it, you're not protecting your territory, you're not keeping and claiming what you have, why should anybody take you seriously and respect you? And that's where I realized I was wrong. And now I've made those corrections, and I move accordingly in accordance to the spiritual fight at hand. So with all that being said, if you do want to join the Regal Change Academy, where we are growing in mind, body, and soul every single day, we have a weekly group call, as well as a weekly Bible study, as well as a bunch of other classes that you can take. There's the paid community in the link in the description box below, as well as the free Discord that you can join, available in the link in the description box below as well. I want to thank everybody that has been moving over from YouTube over to X and Rumble recently. And with all that being said, peace be with you all. Till next time.